This meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome everyone. Looks like we have folks joining. We'll give it a minute before we get started here. Hope everyone's having a great day, night, morning, wherever you're at. Lots of folks rolling in. Welcome, welcome. Feel free to say hi in the chat while we get started. What's up, Kata? Always stoked to see some familiar faces. Oh, I'd love to know where everyone's from. Maybe put in the chat where you're watching, tuning in from. Hello. Oregon, Dallas, Croatia.
Portland,
Uruguay.
Oregon, Matt Milligan. Hey, Matt.
Jim, what's up?
Morning.
All right, we got Munich, South Africa. Nice. Love it. Gotta love Zoom.
Wow. Melissa, reporting from Cape Town. And Candy. What up, boss?
What's up, Candy? Okay,
Hi, Ron.
we are going to get started in just a minute. It looks like folks are here.
Hi, Lucy Adams. Hello.
Hi, Lucy. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure more folks will join us. This is a webinar, a Zoom webinar. So you can see us, we can't see you. And the chat is, a function you can use to communicate with us. There is also a Q&A function, a question function. So on the bottom, you should see a little box that says Q&A. And if you have questions for us throughout today's webinar, you can put your questions in the Q&A. We'll try our best to answer as many as possible at the end. But just know that the chat and the Q&A are different things. So if you have a question, put it in the Q&A because we might not see it in the chat. So thanks, everyone. This Zoom webinar is planned to be 60 minutes, an hour. And we're going to get started. So welcome, everyone. This is a webinar presented by World Skate's Gender Equality Commission. It is called Women's Skateboarding Events, Keys to Success. My name is Kim Woozy, and I will be hosting / moderating our conversation today. So a little bit of introduction about who we are. So we've got Natalia Sanchez, who's the co-founder of Empilar Skate Sport Club and is a skate park builder in Argentina. She's also a member of OFS Argentina. We also have Renata Paschini. She was a pro skater in 1986. She's a co-founder and CEO of Women's Skateboard Association Brazil, and she is also a judge for World Skate and the Brazil National Federation. We also have Veronica Trillo. She's the co-founder of Asa Planchaba. She's also the co-founder of Dolores Magazine, and she's a member of the Spanish Skateboarding Federation. And then we have Alex White, who is NHS's Women's and Non-Binary Rider Relations. She's also the brand manager for Crux Trucks, and she's also a judge for World Skate and a contest commentator. And my name is Kim Woozy. As I said before, I'm the director of marketing and partnerships at Skate Like a Girl. We're a 501c3 in the States. And I also sit on the board for the Center for Sports and Social Justice at Cal State East Bay. And I was the co-founder of Mafia TV. So that is us. Quick little note about the GEC, the Gender Equality Commission, who we are, what we're up to. I'm not going to read out our objectives, but this is just a quick overview around what we're up to. And this will be sent out afterwards as well. So you can go back to the slides. So we're going to move on to today's webinar, the topic that everyone's here for, keys to successful women's skateboarding events. And this webinar is actually focused on competitions. So we have a large range of people joining us today from all over the world and different locations where skateboarding's at different stages, right? So there's some locations in the world where it's still growing and small, it's brand new. And obviously there's other places where it's been around for a long time. So just to preface this presentation, this is very much a foundational presentation around what we believe are the keys to success from kind of like the starting point, and specifically around contests. So hope you all enjoy the presentation and learn something from what we have learned over the past 20 plus years. So section 1, we are going to move into the topic of leadership. And with that, I'm going to ask Nate and Veronica to come off mute and ask both of them a few questions. So welcome, Nate and Veronica. First question is for Veronica. Can you share with us why it is important to have women in leadership roles?
Thank you, Kim, and welcome everybody. Well, it's a fact that women are still underrepresented in public life and decision making, but women's full participation brings progress for everyone. Why is this? We're gonna share 3 key points today. First, better performance. Multiple research shows that gender diversity on your teams increases soft skills such as communication, creativity, or problem solving. A recent report also finds that gender diversity is related to better business outcomes, reputation, and talent attraction, which makes it easier to have more women across other levels. This leads up to the second point. Women leaders in sports inspire other girls and women to strive for their dreams. We defeat gender stereotypes and create safe spaces for girls, women, children, families, communities, everyone. And this has a positive impact on participation. Third, your leadership team is a mirror for who will enter the path of skateboarding. Not only competent, why not even producers, MCs, commentators, photographers, marketing, coaches, judges, referees. Female talent still has a lot to give in those fields. So why it's important to have women in leadership positions? Better performance, inspiring participation, and please don't miss the talent. Thank you, everyone. Back to Kim.
Thank you, Veronica. So these are, some very basic points, which for some of you may be obvious, but we always like to reemphasize the importance of women in leadership roles. I still think there's a lot of growth and gaps to close to get there. So next question is for Nate. Nate, can you share with us some tips for hiring and working with women successfully?
Thank you, Kim. And yes, I'm bringing here some tips for successful hiring and partnership. And the first one is don't just hire the first and only women that you know. Do the work, research, find out what they have contributed and how they are related to the community. The second one is trust in your decision and trust them to make decisions. Don't just do it to fill a quota. And with that, be objective and ask the same questions that you would ask to a man when you want to hire someone. Another very important one is treat women the same and have the same expectations. And the last one is including women and include all of them into the making decision process, like the strategies or planning. This could be very good, and maybe, like you said, it looks like a little bit obvious, but with these little tips, it will be very good for the hiring and partnership.
Thank you, Nate. And again, yes, it's always important to emphasize these foundational aspects. One thing I'll just point out is that it kills me when a brand or a company or event organization hires a woman and then is just like, she's just there to check a box. They're not actually utilizing her. They're not trusting her to make decisions. They're not including her in the process. It's like, you might as well just not hire her then, but don't do that. You should hire her and listen to her and really bring her in. Do the research, take the time. You know, it might take a while to find someone that's the right fit, but we believe that like doing that work is then going to actually benefit your team and be make an impact in the long run. So here are some great examples of, you know, women in leadership roles in and around World Skate. Many of you probably know these folks, but Vanessa Torres, our good friend, is a World Skate judge. And we have Miho, aka Kama, who's the women's Japanese coach. And then, of course, Mimi Noop, legend, co-founder of Hoopla Skateboards, and also co-founded the Alliance in WSA, which we'll talk about a little bit later, who is Team USA's coach. So we recognize that not every team, not every country has, you know, a woman in the coaching body. We wanted to highlight and elevate examples of teams and groups that do have that. So now we're going to move on to the next section, participation. So I'm going to invite Renata to come off mute. Welcome, Renata. All right, first question for you. If I'm an event organizer and I'm hosting a contest, do I need to host more than a final for the women?
Hi, Kim, thank you. So it's important just not host just a final. You might show a path. When you host just a final, you give the opportunity only for 80 girls to compete. When you have other phases as qualifiers, semifinals, and final, you give the opportunity to more girls to compete. It's important too for the judges to see the phases of competition, so then they can see the evolution of each skater. And create multiple divisions like kids, amateur, beginners. You encourage girls to pursue a career in sports. So they have the opportunity to compete with their age and their ability group. And we have two, the psychological impacts. Impact skaters' viewpoints and how they relate and value themselves. Fools anger for progression and competitiveness to the girls. But we have a negative impact when women's contests is an afterthought or lesbian. So, Kim?
Awesome, thank you, Renata. Next question is, what are some strategies for effective event planning? And I can speak to this. A few tips is that if you can't expand your men's amateur contest, consider hosting a separate standalone girls or women only contest. It's important to have space for girls and women as well. And we believe that if you are doing an event with all genders, anything less than 100% equal is going to devalue the women. So that includes heats, you know, qualifiers, all that stuff. So number of athletes, you know, prize purse. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And then lastly, if you don't have folks internally to help you plan, you can always hire a consultant. So going back to section 1 around leadership, if that's not, you know, fiscally possible or just feasible for your team at the moment, you know, an easier solution is to just bring in someone to consult you for your event. So next question for this topic is, you know, speaking on behalf of many of our friends that are joining, you know, from regions around the world where skateboarding is developing, it's very new. If there's not many, you know, women skaters in my region or girls skating, how do I grow participation? And this question is for Renata.
Yes, thank you, Kim. So if you don't have many girls skating in your region, first of all, standalone women's events are the key for outreach and participation. You can't be what you can't see. So first of all, you might create safe space for girls to practice skateboarding. We can give the example, the girls session that we have in Brazil. So if you have the possibility to schedule times only for girls at the skate parks, you give them more security to practice. It's important too during this session, organizing meetings, parties, game of skate with gifts, food, music, show the new girls how the skateboard lifestyle is. Cast a wild invitation match. Invitation is important. Much more girls knowing about the events and what happening in this skate park, more girls can come. And you can simulate jam sessions and demos and some kinds of competition for these girls during this session. So you can give these girls they can feel the experience of pressure when you are in a real competition, when you are standing alone in a field of competition. And the most important is hold competitions with equal judgment, equal prize, and equal rights. So, no girls, events are the start point. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. And yeah, it's important to emphasize that, you know, a lot of the markets that are really large for skateboarding in general, and then we see an increase in participation for girls and women, obviously didn't start out large. So what we see is just definitely consistency, and also having these standalone events, you know, these community building events does create a special space. And then over time you see the growth, you know, and also wanted to underscore that once you have the event, it's kind of like if you create it, you know, they will come. So it's important to just do it and like know that it will grow over time. We've seen the patterns in other places as well. So here are some examples of where, you know, events have been effective in terms of participation. Obviously, they're in places where we see sort of the top competitors at the moment, you know, the US, Japan, Brazil. And then of course, you know, there's also a photo here of Girls Invasion in Argentina. So again, it's important to know that like these events started with like 10 people, you know, so over time, you know, these are consistent events that have grown over time. And so it's just helpful to know that like you can make that happen, and it just takes that dedication, and then hitting some of the points that we've talked about, you know, in this webinar will also make a difference in your region. So we're going to move on to the next section, which is marketing and brand value. I'm going to ask Alex to come off mute. Welcome, Alex. All right. Burning question. What is the data saying?
Well, thanks, Kim. One of the hurdles to running successful events is brand partnerships. And we have some data to back up to help you make the case for good brand partnerships. So on the next slide here, women's participation rates are growing exponentially. You'll look at this slide here. One of the biggest subsects with seeing the most growth is 35 and over who make over $100,000 a year. So that's a huge buying power. That group of consumers is very interested in skateboarding and is growing very fast.
And I do want to acknowledge that this is a binary report. So there's only data around, you know, men and women, but hopefully they'll move into including other genders as well.
The new data, I just was going to add on, the new data for Action Watch is supposed to come out in about a month. So that data is from 2020, but we're looking about 36% of skateboarders right now in North America are female identified.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I think that women's skateboarding creates really good, compelling stories that are attractive to brands. Some of these stories, like on the next slide, you're seeing brands looking for new, fresh stories, new partnership opportunities. What we've been seeing in like a lot of the skateboard competitions right now, we're seeing a really huge youth movement. All these women that are skateboarding right now and winning medals are 14 and under. And it's really incredible and compelling to see these stories. Major endemic brands in the US like Deluxe and NHS are drawing a hard line and saying basically they're not going to be involved in any events unless there's a women's component to the event. So you're seeing endemic brands pushing back too and saying, look, unless you're going to include the women, we're not going to give you a sticker. And just if in case you're unfamiliar with Deluxe and NHS, we're two of the biggest skateboard manufacturing, hard goods manufacturers in the world.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, obviously Alex is in her position at NHS, and then Deluxe, which includes, you know, companies like Real, Spitfire. Now, Jim is participating here. Also has Ashley Rayfeld, who is a woman in, decision-making role. So great examples to point number one around just hiring women in leadership positions. So next up, here are some case studies or examples as Alex was referring to. Alex, talk to us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Well, Haïs Leal is a name that most of you are familiar with. She's kind of the poster child for SLS. We saw her in all the campaign videos for 2021 season. Progression lives here, and it really does. Having been to those events firsthand, watching her compete and her just show-stopping performance, it was incredible. So you're seeing these kind of like iconic new ambassadors to skateboarding emerge, like Haïsa. You're also seeing top selling skateboards. The number one selling skateboard for NHS was Fabian Delfino's pro model. A female pro model skateboard was the number one selling one we had last year. And you're also seeing huge global campaigns with mainstream companies, even like Mercedes and Gucci, tapping skateboarders, women skateboarders, to be ambassadors for their brands as well.
Definitely. And the example here is Mariah in a global Adidas campaign. And these aren't just skateboarding ads or videos. It's like their entire sporting lifestyle campaigns featuring women skaters. All right, so now we're going to move on to our last section, which is around pay equality, our favorite topic that we love to talk about.
So yeah, Kim, why should we pay men and women equally?
Well, so here I've included two videos that I think are really helpful. We don't have time to play the videos today, but feel free to grab the links or we'll paste them in the chat at the end. And essentially, one major, I would say, argument for paying men and women equally is that if we imagine our skateboarding event or our skateboarding community or industry locally or globally as an economy, the World Economic Forum, actually, their research shows that when men and women are paid equally and women are working, that's the quickest way to grow an economy, right? So on that same note, if we imagine, what we're doing as, an economy, this is one of the best ways to grow skateboarding in your region or just your event, is to pay men and women equally. These videos, like I said, are great examples of, the nuances around that, but ultimately, being able to, what one of the speakers in this video said is like, to free the potential of women is the fastest multiplier. So if you're interested in growing your skateboard community, you want to see more skateboarders, being able to do these events and paying, everyone equally, whether they're in leadership positions behind the scenes or they're participants, is one of the most crucial things that you should consider. So a few other examples here, the U.S. women's national soccer team famously, has been in this battle with USA Soccer around pay equality. And if anything, I believe that we should learn from what they're up to and learn from USA Soccer's mistakes, because the way we see it, the negatives are just not worth it. There's all kinds of press and media around this, and it's just not a good look. And now, I feel like USA Soccer's just had to like defend their point, so deeply that it's almost like, all right, just like pay them equally and it'll all work out. Relating back to skateboarding, for those of you who are not familiar, in 2005, there was a boycott at X Games led by Cara Beth Burnside and Mimi Knoop. And that was the beginning of the alliance. And, they essentially had to take an action in order to reach that equality. And, through their collective actions, and then conversations and patience, a few years later, X Games announced equal prize purse across all sports, all, winter and summer. And not a lot of people knew that was why X Games has equal prize purse. And at the same time, this has happened, and this could happen again at any event. And so it would be, in my opinion, a little bit foolish to have to do this again. Like we can't go backwards. I mean, we could go backwards, but we're trying to move forward. So again, like boycott, I don't know if you're hosting an event and that's something you want to avoid. It's very simple, just have equal prize purse. And moving on to this next slide, a common misconception is that there's less people interested in terms of an audience, right? Because oftentimes events are businesses and it's all about the views and the advertising sales and all that stuff. And some people say, well, people just don't want to watch women as much as men. We hear that argument a lot. And so just looking at some of the data, like numbers that are tangible, looking at, Tony Hawk and Hayes Lial's following, it's really close, and she is very young. So there's a lot of interest and opportunity. And, to us, this data says that actually people do want to watch women and they want to follow them and they're fans. So the whole argument around there not being an audience, to us is sort of dispelled if you really look at this information in the data. So, just to kind of wrap up this section, some of the common misconceptions, here we've addressed most of them, and hopefully, there's some, I don't know, different viewpoints that some of you guys can take on, or you've thought about something differently. The last one, Alex, you want to speak to? So we hear that sometimes where the event organizers say that skaters will complain if the prize money is equal. What are your thoughts on that one, Alex?
In my experience, the skaters never complain. The male skaters, I mean, no one's complaining about equal prize purse. I think if anything, we have really staunch supporters on the men's side. So yeah.
Definitely. Yep. 100%. All right. So here are the topics we covered. We know, again, this was a foundational conversation. Hopefully, we will be doing more of these. But, as a takeaway, these are the areas to focus on. If you're, looking to host your first, skateboard competition in your region, or you're looking to sort of like expand now that, Tokyo is sort of behind us, these are the areas that we recommend focusing on. And we hope that this webinar was valuable for you all today. Let's look at the Q&A and see if we can tackle some of the questions here. All right, let's give us a second to look through this. Okay, we have a question around how can we get more women involved, to actually compete in contests. Sometimes the field is small, right? And so this kind of goes back to our section around participation. If the field is small in terms of actual competition, doing more community building events will provide a path to progression to contests, because obviously if skateboarding is, relatively new, or there's just not a lot of existing infrastructure for professional competitive skateboarding or amateur competitive skateboarding, you're not just going to go from everyone skateboarding to elite contests, right? So the in-between events are really important. And something just as like a very tangible tip is that at Skate Like a Girl, we do a lot of community events where there's opportunities to skate in front of a crowd, and it's more like a showcase, or just, it's not competitive. There's no judging. It's not like, oh, you're entering this because you think you want to win. It's like, here's a platform. There's a bunch of people here, overcome your fears around skating in public, or just have the chance to have, a situation where there's nerves involved and everyone's watching you. Things like that can help lead to encouraging skaters to feel more comfortable to skate on a competitive level. So hopefully that is helpful. Does any of our panelists want to add to answering that question, or add to anything I said? Nope. Okay. Another question is, we got a question around, okay, yes, this is the Gender Equality Commission. We're talking about things in the binary. Right now, the Olympics is still a binary competition. A good resource to check out is Athlete Ally. They're doing a lot of work, and they have a partnership with the IOC around expanding inclusion, right, to non-binary or trans athletes. And so while we are all very committed to, creating an inclusive skateboarding community, it's going to take a lot of pieces on the level of the IOC. And so, I think that that's an area that I'm excited to like move into. And one area that will be interesting is just team competition as well. You see that in the believe we'll be seeing that in the Winter Olympics this year, where it's all gender competition. So it's a great question. It's something that I hope that this sort of industry will continue to move forward on, and specifically with contests and events. So hopefully that answers your question. Great question. Let's see, any other questions, panelists, that we want to answer here? We had a question around the data. Alex, do you know if Action Watch data is just from the US, or does it include international stats?
Yeah, good question. Action Watch is just North America. That's
Gotcha.
Canada and US.
Yeah, data is a big one. Obviously, there are, I think some groups, some companies, doing like measuring the data, but it's not enough. There's a lot more data out there that, in my opinion, could be measured, but there's always gaps to close for sure. Okay, let's see. Any other questions here? Someone asked, why is the Olympics important for developing like girls and women skaters? Does anyone want to take that one on?
I can speak to it a little bit.
Sure.
Looking at the lead up, the 2 years prior to the Tokyo 2020 games, we saw, this is also, I think, one of the things feeding into that increase in participation numbers that you're seeing. It's really hard to draw a direct correlation between the Olympics and participation numbers, like it's chicken or the egg or horse in the cart kind of thing. But we definitely have been seeing this huge push and this kind of broadening of reach to the mainstream. A lot of us have different stories about how we got into skateboarding. You either saw your brother did it or your neighbors did it or whatever, but now we're seeing people who are actually seeing it on television for the first time. And it's introducing skateboarding to a whole new group of people that otherwise never even thought it was a possibility for them. And so I think it's really, really important. It's going to open up possibility models for girls and women all across the world.
Definitely. And it's all, at the end of the day, it's just, exposure is really important, as well as storytelling. For many of us, or for many of the pro skaters that are currently, at the highest level, they had examples of women before them, either, with events like X Games back in the day, or media. Shout out to, Lisa Whitaker, Girl Skate Network. So that's really important. That visual representation is really important. Another question is, how can brands make space for all expressions of femininity in their sponsored athletes? Alex does a great job of this. Do you want to take this one?
Well, expressions of femininity, I think expressions of gender or gender expressions, not just necessarily feminine ones. I think that I historically, I'll just go personal. Like I rode for Roxy in the early 2000s. And if you weren't blonde and white, you didn't really have a place on the team. Period. And we've come so far over the last 25 years. Obviously, we have a lot more to go, but they're seeing that, Instagram and, like athlete to fan direct communication is huge right now with social media. So the value is supporting these skateboarders, your heroes, in whatever avenue that you want to. And the brands are seeing the attractiveness of that. They see the following that these people have. So I think that there's a lot more space, and we're making more and more space as we see that these groups, however you express your gender, are getting a lot of support from fans.
Yeah. If you need a case study, just share with whoever you're trying to enroll the Crux team, the content, the ads, all of it, Instagram, just the team itself. I think Alex is doing a great job of, really breaking down the existing structures that used to be around, who can be represented. Here's a question for Vero, I believe. Someone asked that they're doing a series in Europe and are looking to bring on a women's skate film crew. is there a platform where they could share or put out a call for women filmers in Europe?
Yeah, I was reading that question too also. Thank you, Kim. Yeah, I address you to Así Planchaba and Dolores Magazine. I'm sorry, it's my my media, but we launch every video and every community that we can put a light on and spot female crews and non-binary crews, of course. I'm seeing a lot of comments also about language, if we could do this in Spanish. So I'm sorry, folks, not today, because language is like the most extended international language, maybe for another day. This webinar will be soon on YouTube, I guess. Maybe you can use YouTube credits or just write us in Spanish. We can, Nate and I are Spanish talkers, so anything you need. Also, there's a very interesting commentary about how other commentators in events use how do you say that? Language needs to be required for us to be informed about the correct gender of the contestants. Are they about to contestants even story like misgender repeatedly? It happens a lot, not only in events, like in daily life. And I think that it's part of this webinar series we're gonna launch to have more information for all the people and having like diverse commentators like Alex. We have Alex here with us today, great commentator who is sensible and makes part of all this reality, new reality that we have to live every day.
Yeah, and I can speak to that as well. The question is, how can we enforce language on event commentators, especially keeping in mind trans folks and non-binary folks? That is up to the broadcast company, right? It's the Olympics is broadcasted all over the world in a million different languages and different channels on TV, on the internet. And so it is really up to the producers of that TV show to bring in the right people to do a good job, right? And that applies for any factor. But as we, the audience, right, the way, so we can't enforce that, right? Because it's up to that company, that, media company. But what we can do is demonstrate that in our everyday lives, which is to, invite people to learn how, to use pronouns and to share your own pronouns and normalize, pronouns in general, since that is new for some people. And ultimately, like, elevate and support what Veronica was saying, diverse identities in the talent side, right? So not only in the leadership positions, but that includes people on camera. So for example, Alex is a great example. She is one of the first, women commentators on a US broadcast for Olympic qualifying events, and, continuing to move down that path. I'd love to see a non-binary or a trans identified commentator, moving towards that future. So those are the ways that I think, like the direction to move in. But I do feel also that things take time, and the way that I feel like things have most effectively transformed and moved towards, this world where people aren't marginalized and harmed is to really be that ourselves, like be the change you wish to see. I know it sounds corny, but to take that on, like to have conversations with folks who, in your real life, or if people in leadership positions, around like how important it is to be represented and to not be misgendered, and to be using, the correct language to talk about, people, humans. So yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, it's something that, again, like is going to evolve and continue to move down that path. And it's something that, we are committed to as individuals. All right, let's see. Any other questions, panelists, that you see that we haven't addressed yet? I know there's actually a lot here, which is great. Appreciate everyone's participation. We have a
I kinda
question
wanna
about
address-
the scoring. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah,
what I was
go
going
ahead.
for. Yeah,
Yeah.
Amelia Brodka, love you, Amelia. Amelia is amazing, Olympic athlete. My opinion on the so there's two scoring systems right now. What Amelia is referring to about the equality in the scoring system is the global scoring system, which is a 0 to 10 scale regardless of gender for street, 0 to 100 regardless of gender for park. And so you have these two scoring systems that when you're seeing it on television may reflect women getting smaller scores, lower scores than to men's scores, because we're using one scoring system. So, you know, Nija's nollie heel back lip down the rail is a 9.25. There's no woman that can do that yet. But so maybe one of the best tricks that you're going to see in the women's is how you said doing a front blunt shove it down the rail or kickflip front board down the rail, and that's going to land her in like the 6s or something like that. So you're seeing this gap, right? And like some people have said that doesn't look good to an audience that's untrained. But I think that the global scoring system, when Martin Karras first told me about it, I was like really angry at him, and I hated this idea of a global scoring system because I thought it was like inherently sexist. But I'm totally on board with this too, because I think it really opens up. It gives women a huge like hallway, a huge, you know, runway to keep going down, and the progression is going so fast that we can get to those scores eventually. And it also opens up non-binary athletes. Like this idea that if we're not genderizing scoring, if there's not a women's 9 and a men's 9, then there's something in between for everybody. And if we keep the scoring attached to the skateboarding tricks and what we're seeing, it's really about the performance, and we remove gender from the scoring situation, I think that it just it creates this way that skateboarding can be the only event in the Olympics that might not be binary. So I think it's really important that we stay with the global scoring system, in my opinion.
All right. Thanks, Alex. And yeah, it's possible that we could have the next, GEC World Skate webinar to address that. We shall see. I'm curious if there's other topics that folks would like the World Skate to host webinars on. Feel free to pop that in the chat. And, this is something we hope to continue to do more of. So hopefully if people have topics that they're interested in that, seems to be popular, then that will help point us in the right direction. All right, let's see. Any other questions here that we wanted to address? Also, I did want to shout out Candace pasted in the chat. Thank you, Candace. The IOC's updated gender policy for trans and non-binary athletes. I believe that is what Athlete Ally worked with the IOC on. I know that announcement came earlier last year. So yeah, that's a good document or article to check out around the new policies that they have implemented moving forward. All right, let's see. Any other questions? Someone asked if, Patricia, if you can write about this on your website. Sure. I believe that this link is going to be shared on YouTube or through World Skate's email newsletter. So if you're registered for this webinar, you will be receiving the recording. All right. Well, appreciate everyone's time and participation today. We're going to wrap here. And like we said, if you have, questions or future topics, definitely pop them into the chat and or shoot an email to World Skate. I believe there might be a survey after, I'm not sure, but either way, share with us, what you like to see, and appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully this was informative and valuable in some way, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.